Hello everyone, welcome to this part of the tutorial. Today we're going to talk about firmware updates, because as you know, the ESL server consists of the ESL server running on a PC, but also a base station that connects to the actual ESL labels that are in your store. And both pieces of hardware can get software updates, or rather firmware updates. And in this episode, I'm going to talk to you and walk you through updating your firmware. So let's get started. I have a base station here on my desk, and when we go to the ESL server software, we can see that the unit is reporting that it is currently running version IBMV 0027B. That version means what kind of firmware is running on there. And 27B is a non-existent one that I've installed for this tutorial. And in order to update a base station, you select it in your base station list, you choose firmware update, and you can download the latest firmware from our website. If you install the ESL server, you'll also receive the latest firmware versions at the moment of release. So we're going to serve to the C disk, Opticon, ESL server, firmware. Well, this is an EBS30 base station, so we choose the EBS3X folder. And here you can see a binary file, IBMV0027. Now you can check IBMV here, IBMV on the screen. That is the correct version. Those four letters are an indicator of the exact product. So we press open, and the firmware update bar will load. That is an indication of the actual uploading of the data to the base station. It goes to a disconnected status while it is updating. As you can see, it went really fast. Right now we're already running IBMV version 0027, so the B was off, and now we are running the latest firmware version for this EBS30. Awesome. So that's how you update a base station. Now let's switch over to the labels. Now I've prepared a couple of labels on my desk here, and this one is showing the default template or the default image with the Opticon logo and the MAC address that we talked about in other lessons. And now I want to draw your attention to the top right of this unit. As you can see that there is a indicator which states the current firmware version on the label itself. So what it is saying is this is running IRVV. That is once again the indicator of the exact hardware, version 0127. Well, there's actually a newer one. So what we want to do is, once again, we go back to the ESL server. We go to the ESL tab, and here you can also see the version. As with the base station, version stands for the firmware version currently running on the hardware. Now, as I said, we had the IRVV on there, so let's just look at all of the IRVV labels on our system. And these are the ones on my desk, IRVV 0127. Now, these are pretty old. If we want to firmware update them, we can select a group, so you can update the firmware of more than one label at the same time. Once again, we go to firmware update, click on the little button, and we say under the firmware folder that we're going to look at the ePaper ESLs folder. Open it up. There's a long list. Well, this is a 293, so EE29XR. And another check that you're selecting the right one is, again, those four letters at the start, IRVV. Well, the ones we have are also running IRVV. The last four are the version. So this is 127. Well, we can update them to 159. We press open. And this one is a little bit different. With the base station, we upload it to the base station, and the base station updated. What we're doing now is uploading this firmware version to the base station, and then the base station will redistribute it over all of the labels that we selected. So the progress bar is slowly filling up, and you can see that the version is now a dark green, which means that a new firmware is being queued. We can actually say what we want to know about the status, and that's this column over here. And this label has its firmware update started. Now this can take a couple of minutes. Like with an image transfer, the entire binary file needs to travel wirelessly from the base station to the actual label. And once it's on the label will try and install the firmware, reboot, and then connect back to the base station that it was last connected to. The beauty of this is, whereas a base station you can only update one at a time, I've selected multiple ESLs at the same time, and over the next couple of minutes all of those labels will update. Sometimes the firmware update can fail. There is a watchdog timer which makes sure that when a label is offline for too long, it decides, okay, this is going wrong. I probably have one bit wrong somewhere in the data. I'm going to revert back to the previous version. So you don't have to be afraid that your labels will suddenly brick or go offline. When it can't update, it rolls back to the previous version. So it's perfectly safe. And once it's failed, it will report that back to the ESL server. You can just select the label, click on this button again to select the file. Since we've already uploaded a file to the base station, it will ask, do you wish to use the currently loaded firmware with the firmware that is currently on there? Well, this is IRVV 159, and this one is running 127, so we say yes, that is exactly what we want. And then you can resend it. When you have an entire store with hundreds of labels, of course this will take some time. By default, about 10 labels at the same time can update their firmware. It is a bit of a manual investment, but it runs pretty darn fast. And once it's done, it will go to this light green. It will still go back to the old version, as you can see, because it's waiting for the confirmation from the label that it actually updated. Now, if we look at the number, this is for number 99 that updated. So we can see here in the top right, this is now running IRVV 159, which means that our update has succeeded. Now, any second now, the ESL will start polling with the base station that it was connected to before we firmware updated it. And once it does, it will report to the ESL server, hey, I'm back online, I've got the new firmware version, and everything is working again. That, in a nutshell, is how you update the firmware of both your base station and your ESLs. Of course, if you have any questions remaining, or if you're wondering about what the latest firmware version is, please feel free to contact us. All of our contact information is in the description. I hope you learned something here today, and we hope to see you in other lessons. Thank you for watching. Bye-bye.